In a previous video, we talked about pacing, but now we need to compare pacing and railroading. If you haven't seen the previous video, you can watch it right here. But what is the difference between pacing and railroading? For a quick definition, pacing is the speed in which players move through a questline or story. This occurs through story and non-story pacing. Story is of course how you plan and execute the campaign's plot, while non-story is the encounters you use, what die rolls you call, and other types of things the DM uses to move players through the story. But railroading is different. My definition of railroading is when the Dungeon Master creates a fixed series of events that they force their players to experience. It is the process of removing all short-term and long-term player agency. But here's the problem. Lots of TTRPG players call things railroading when it's not even close. For instance, a DM planning a general plot is not railroading. If it was, you need to call every pre-written D&D adventure a railroaded campaign. Having a general understanding of where you want your story to go is just good DMing. It creates a cohesive experience for your players. Now, if an entire adventure is set in stone and there is only one conclusion, for 95% of campaigns that is probably railroading. But a dungeon master constructing plot points or wanting to hit certain narrative beats is a natural part of most story-centered campaigns. Additionally, I also don't think it's unreasonable for a DM to ask their players to follow their own plans. Let me explain. Dungeon masters are people too. We have lives, jobs, and responsibilities. For some dungeon masters, they can only do so much planning and would rather not improv entire sessions. Therefore, these DMs ask the players what they want to do next session and prep around that. But sometimes the party goes off the path and starts diverting from their own plans. In these instances, I also don't think it's railroading to redirect the party back to the prepped content. I don't think of this as railroading because we aren't limiting player agency. Your players chose the route, chose the rails. It's just that in this situation, we run into the fact that D&D is a game run by a person. Dungeon Masters far and wide put a lot of time and effort for their players, but those resources aren't endless. Getting a session to follow the previously agreed on route is, in my opinion, better for both DM and player in the long run. And this really gets to the heart of the video. What is the role that the DM has in guiding the story of a campaign? Well, this is my personal philosophy. The weight of storytelling falls 60% on the Dungeon Master, 30% on the players, and 10% on the die rolls. This is based generally off of D&D, and other systems can vary, but I think that this is the general baseline for most TTRPG systems. And firstly, obviously players contribute to the story. They write backstories, play their characters, and interact with the world. Without the players, there wouldn't be a campaign. But literally everything around them, and all things they can interact with, are formulated by the person running the game. Therefore, we ought to look at the Dungeon Master as the main storyteller. And while D&D isn't like a book or a movie, it still follows the basic tenets of storytelling. Character archetypes, plot structure, themes, and more all fit into a D&D campaign. And while the players take on a little bit of that responsibility managing these things, they don't have the full picture. They are but one character with limited knowledge. Thus, it is widely accepted that the Dungeon Master must balance these elements of storytelling, and while I think there might be a few unicorns out there who can do it all off the cuff, the rest of us mortals have to think about what we are presenting to our players. Whether this be writing it out in a Google Doc or thinking about it for hours on end, this is narrative preparation. And anyone with a brain could tell you that the story cannot be dumped on the players all at once. That's where we encounter pacing. The DM has to control the speed in which the group goes through all the parts of the story that they control. We pace to control theme, tone, character beats, and so much more. And, most importantly, the Dungeon Master has to do this because most groups aren't focused on the overarching experience in the moment. They are busy playing their character. Like, as an example, have you ever seen a D&D party talk in circles for hours on end? They're talking about one specific thing, but not getting anywhere. They're not progressing at all. They're just rehashing the same points over and over again in character. That is a character feedback loop where everyone is so in character that no one thinks about the experience or the story. Those moments are a part of D&D, but I don't think players want every session to have this rudderless slogging feeling. In the moment they are being true to their characters, but the experience as a whole suffers. Dungeon masters pace their campaigns to make sure the overall experience is the very best that it can be. Because here's the thing, very few players want total freedom. Instead, they want to be able to affect the narrative when they want to. But most want to know the mission. They want to feel like they are naturally in a story. The role of the Dungeon Master is to create the platform for the players to roleplay their characters upon. A Dungeon Master's story flows with the players, but not at their whims. The Dungeon Master is a player too, and their own expressiveness needs to be woven into the story in equal measure. But that's why the story is collaborative. The players influence the DM and vice versa. So the DM's job when guiding the story is to curate the experience. Great DMs have their own unique styles. Those styles arise from how they curate their games. So don't be afraid to pace your games. Think about how, when, and why things occur in your D&D games. And if you want some help structuring your narratives when it comes to D&D games, check out this video right here. And thank you for entering the dungeon.